The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara Bryant. I'm Sara Bryant, your host, and today we have Jackie Bryant on the show. Jackie is a San Diego-based journalist and managing editor of San Diego Magazine. Her freelance work is concentrated on cannabis business and culture, but also spans travel, food, wine, spirits, arts and culture, and organized labor. And I am a big fan of her cannabis culture newsletter, Cannabis. So, Jackie, welcome. I'm so glad you joined me today.
Hi, thank you. I am extremely happy to be here, and I'm so glad that you asked me.
Well, I'm going to ask you one of my stock questions. What got you interested in writing about cannabis?
So I have been, I call myself a lifelong user of cannabis, but obviously, literally, that's not true. But because I did not use it when I was a baby. But, I've been using it since I was a teenager, and it's always been a huge part of my life. But I was never overly connected to the culture other than just maybe having friends that sold over the years or stuff like that, things along that line. But I grew up in New York on Long Island, and, it wasn't the craziest weed culture out in the New York City suburbs. So, when I got into journalism a number of years ago, I was writing mainly about travel, food and restaurants, and wine and spirits. And it just this was before Prop 64, so probably around 2014-ish when I started to get into journalism. And I just kind of realized, oh yeah, you can write about weed the same way you write about wine. You can talk about different cultivars and this and that, and evaluate different things, and different products were starting to come out, and you could do it that way. That's news. This is interesting. It's probably going to legalize soon. So just all of these things started happening, and I quietly added cannabis reporting to my roster, and then I had a pseudonym for a while, and I also just kind of kept it a little quiet because at the time I was married to a non-US citizen, and I was sponsoring him for his green card. So I didn't want to blow that whole thing up, but we got divorced. And so the second we did, which was in 2018, it was on. That's when I really pivoted to full-time cannabis journalism because I could be a bit freer with it. So, I just kind of got led into it through lifestyle topics. And then once I landed there, I had a column called Cannabis, which was a print column at the time in San Diego City Beat. It just really explored culture and then allowed me to get into business. And then through more business reporting and reporting on legalization, reporting on cannabis just kind of opened up my whole journalism life. It allowed me to start reporting on policy and criminal justice and do investigative work, things that I definitely hadn't done before. And it really allowed me to level up as a journalist in general, but kind of gave me a full view of, everything that the plant touches, for lack of a better phrase. So it's been an interesting journey, but yeah, I kind of came into it because I was like, oh, I like smoking weed. I can talk about it like I talk about wine. And then it just totally spiraled, and here we are.
When you were saying East Coast, and I was thinking, every time when I used to work in the dispensary and somebody from the East Coast would show up, I'd look at him and I'd smile and I'd be like, sour diesel?
For sure, yeah. I'm 36, so totally. That was and it half the time it probably wasn't sour D, right? Whatever you were getting, they were just calling it sour D because that's what it was branded. And back then on the East Coast, weed was just weed, and there was just ditch weed, whatever weed, or there was dro, which was short for hydro, and that was just code for it was hydroponic and it's good, but who actually even knows where it came from, right? But
right.
All of that was also always sour D. It's funny. It's so specific.
I imagine that a lot of it came from our sunny coast.
I think so. Exactly. So something tells me, yeah, I think that was all, and we had no idea what we were getting half the time, but that was kind of the beauty of it, right?
Well, that's
Another
it.
time.
I'm originally from Michigan, and so we would get, I don't even know what the heck we would get. There was on the Garden Peninsula, there were families of growers, and I went to school at North Michigan University with many growers' children, but they'd always talk about, that time of the year that everybody would get raided. It's like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
happy tales by the fire, folks.
Right? Just a completely different reality. It's wild. And you know, in New York, we were kind of just a little disconnected from that. Although, like, not from, you know, I had a lot of friends, like I said, that sold and stuff. That was a whole different paradigm, right? Because they weren't growing or anything necessarily, but they were definitely selling, and that was something I was definitely exposed to. So it's interesting. Like my experience with, you know, traditional or legacy markets definitely comes from like good old on the ground distribution.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too because when you think about I mean my perception when I was younger about who'd be selling in the traditional market was really different than the people that I met when I was older. Like in California, I didn't get my recommendation for cannabis until I was in my late 30s because that was when I had cancer, and before that, you know, and this was all before, this was in the 215 days. I just had somebody that I'd get it from. Like I had a friend, you know, she would show up with a few, you know, bags, roaster bags, and I'd ask her what everything was. She'd tell me, and I'd ask her, you know, what that meant, and she had no idea. So I'd just be like, okay, well, I just pick what smells good to me. Let's do it.
Yeah, just roll with it. I know. You know, I kind of miss that in a way, which there's like a privilege in being able to be wistful about that, right? So I definitely know that. But in a way, it was a simpler time.
Yeah, it was. I think the thing that I really liked about it, having more access to dispensaries was being able to have a consistent source of something that was good for my body. Because there were some years that I took off of using cannabis because I'd had a bad reaction to something and I didn't understand that it was just that cultivar and that it wasn't that I didn't do well
Right.
with cannabis.
That's a really good point too, because you know, for me, living in a legal market, and you know, like I said, I'm 36. I've been smoking weed since I was 14, and pretty consistently, probably with just little breaks here and there. And I know it didn't know that much about weed. It really took living in a legal market and having access to all kinds of different stuff, and like having a formal structure that you know, even just like presented it to you so you would have questions that you would go research, right? Like
Right.
even if I wasn't getting the answer at the dispensary, like it was like, oh, this is a thing. What does that mean? And obviously I'm a journalist, so I'm like naturally inquisitive, and like that opened my mind up to just like learning everything about it because I don't know, I guess I didn't really think about it. And I feel like that, I don't know, not to like go on too much of a tangent, but like I feel like that perspective kind of informs my writing because I remember when I was like a heavy user but totally clueless on a lot of it and clueless on the culture, and I had never really stopped much to consider where it came from, whether physically or otherwise. And so I think a lot of people who are disconnected from the culture or activism or even a legal market, especially a legal market, yeah, like they're totally immersed in weed and using it, but like there's so much that they don't know. So I try to like write from that perspective, like because that was a really big light bulb moment for me, it kind of traces like back to all of that, I guess.
I think it's great that you've done that because you're right. People are really, when you see it packaged, you just become detached from it. It's just another thing, a product that you're purchasing at a store, even if you're using it regularly. But if you take the time to dig in, go down the rabbit hole, you start to understand why things are the way they are. And that's
Yeah.
like, you know, after legalization, for for our dispensaries at our Market Street location, I did the first legal sale. And so
Oh, that's so cool.
I'm stock footage now, which always like
It's amazing. Yeah,
cracks
right.
me up.
Every newspaper photo. Yep, absolutely.
Every
I
so
probably used it.
yeah, every so often they drag my ass up and post it.
That's great.
But it's like, you know, it was the wonderful thing about it happening was that people felt more comfortable, you know, accessing it without having had the conversations with their doctors. But one of the many sad things that happened around it was that we had a lot of tears because people were like, I can't afford what's been giving me
Yep.
relief. And then, you know, they get angry and they're like, it's your fault. You're the dispensary, or it's the company's
Yeah.
fault because they're greedy. And that's when you get you
They
invite
get
them.
mad at the journalists who write about it too.
Yeah,
Trust
they do. And you're kind of like, come with me. let's take a little travel down this rabbit hole so you can see exactly what's happening. And it's taxation by the state and all of the things that they make these companies pay for that other industries don't have to do or not be able to account for when they're doing their taxes to be able to get,
Mhm.
those lovely refunds back that the rest of us are able to enjoy who aren't running a cannabis business.
Yep. I mean, legalization is really less legalization than it is commercialization, right? So that
Right.
is obviously going to come with a price, because quite literally, because they are not going to let anybody get away with that for free.
Yeah. It's interesting because it seems like it's almost like a syntax. It's almost like, well,
It is.
yeah, we look at you as outlaws, so we're going to behave as outlaws when we ring you for every last dime and we don't care if you survive or not.
Oh, 1,000,000%. It's very cheeky. It's very like, we know what you quote unquote got away with, and we know what you want, and we know that we have to force you to play within these rules, otherwise you will not get it. So we're going to extract as much as we can from it. The health of your enterprise be damned. And it's completely divorced from the fact that a healthy and thriving legal cannabis industry is good for public health. It is good for communities. It is good for, public safety, you name it, etc. That's what it's supposed to be about, but it's not. It's about how can it generate revenue for the state. And that's why, like, latching onto that syntax mentality is really just always a failed endeavor, because there's going to be a time where it doesn't produce enough revenue, and then your utility to the state gets called into question, right? And
Right.
then the whole thing falls apart. And I think we're starting to feel that the strain of that relationship here, especially in California right now, right?
Yeah, why here's the question for you. And I bring this one up a lot because it's like I just it's almost one of those things where you see something so clearly so you have to ask other people to make sure that you're still sane.
Yes, I totally know what I mean, dude. When talking about legal weed, yeah, I'm like gut checking everything. I'm like, am I insane? And people are like, no, 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 no. I thought that too. I'm like, great, okay, good.
That's it. I don't understand how the theories around economics don't resonate for state agencies when they are looking at cannabis because
No,
I'm
they
on
just don't apply.
I guess these don't, but it's like I'm on the San Francisco Cannabis Oversight Committee, and the controller's office did a report a couple of years ago about the price per gram of cannabis, and they're like, oh, the price has gone up due to competition, and that's when I got on the mic and I was like, okay, so nothing has ever gone up in price because of
Literally.
competition.
Like, literally, that has literally never happened in the history of liberal economics.
Yeah. And I was like, you know why it's going up is because you're overtaxing people. It's taxed every step of the way, besides the fact that it's expensive anyway to do business in California, and the real estate prices are ridiculous, especially in the major metropolitan areas. So don't tell me that it's gone up because of competition. And like I got so many people calling and asking about it afterwards, and I thought this isn't even we shouldn't even have to have a conversation about it because it's common sense. And when the state is looking at taxation and the fact of the first year that we were legalized, that they were disappointed that they didn't make as much taxes as they should have.
See, exactly. And then they start to go, wait, but then why are we keeping you legal anyway, right?
Right. If they really were thinking about it, they'd lower the damn taxes because they'd make so much more money because people would actually purchase from the legal market.
Exactly. And that's actually just happened in San Diego. So I'm sure you're aware, and if you're not, if you think about it for 2 seconds, you're like, wait, there aren't any brands from San Diego. There are not many that are domiciled here, right?
Yeah.
Jetty actually started down here. These guys know Till Kings. They're living soil growers in Long Beach now. They started here, but everyone got ran out of town. There is definitely like some heavy cartel stuff with the traditional market here and biker gang stuff. We're a border town, so that kind of just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we had a manufacturing tax in the city of San Diego that was, I believe, around 9% for the manufacturing level of things, and it just drove any operator that was here or that was legacy and trying to go legal out of town because they just couldn't operate. We just lifted that, but they did a detailed financial report showing what the city could make. There were 40 licenses and only 9 of them had been filled. So they said, this is what you lose by not having those licenses filled versus what you think you're getting by taxing them at this full amount. So that is starting to change on a local level. They just like haven't really gotten to it at the state level, but I do know that and obviously that conversation is ongoing. But yeah, like some local jurisdictions are finally like getting it. They're like, okay, we are, over the tax inflection point here where it starts to punish the industry rather than support it.
Yeah.
Or extract from it, which is what I really think it is. But, that's neither here nor there.
And I'm going to use everybody's favorite phrase. Actually, I've heard so many people say they're tired of hearing about it. California's major extinction events.
Yeah, and you know what? I have literally written a story with that title in High Tide summer. So absolutely 400% guilty. Like totally guilty.
Yeah, I still use it because I'm like, how else do you describe the Armageddon that's happening in this industry?
It's true. I mean, people are dying by suicide because they cannot endure what's happening. Like it is not by any means, when people are dying, it is not extreme to use words like extinction. Is quite literally what it means. I mean, I'm sure you, just as we know, many of probably the same growers who are going fallow this year, who are just not participating, and brands, and they're all falling under too. And even the corporate ones, like I know that like nobody's doing well, and I don't have too much sympathy for that layer of the industry, but I also know that like, yeah, maybe they're breaking even, or they're a little bit in the red, or they're in the red in a way that they can sustain due to their capitalization, but they're not doing okay. Like nobody's doing okay. And it's heavy.
Yeah, it is. And that's, I think what policymakers aren't understanding is that it's not just faceless people, and faceless companies. Like, I don't know what they think is going on. But it's, I had the other month I did an interview with the former head of the RNC, Michael Steele, because he's doing stuff in cannabis. I met him a couple years ago at ArcView, and he also doesn't like Trump, so I was like, yay. All right, let's talk.
Like, word, all right.
Yeah,
like, that's a point we can start on, yeah.
Exactly.
Coalesce around that.
Yeah, he's the
new water cooler, the proverbial water cooler.
I know, I'm like, you don't like Trump, but you're okay with me. He's so funny, and he really he wants to have real conversations about it. But when I told him about the growers, the suicides of the growers, he was just flabbergasted. And I'm like, why aren't we talking about this more?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is I do know because I briefly mentioned it in reporting of mine, but I haven't gone into depth on it. I know that everyone, up north, to me has been, and obviously everyone's hesitant talking to me, but they've all been hesitant talking to a report. I think they don't want it to get out there. I think, it's a proud and tough community, and they've withstood a lot. And I think that's a little bit of a point. That grit is a point of pride. And also it's just deeply sad and personal, right? It's very revealing. And so I just think, I don't know that everyone's coming to terms. I think we're still in the point where they're living through it, right? Like maybe a little too hard to like face that music right now. And I totally get that. It's and that's the thing. It's like this, there are real lives at stake, and communities, entire communities, and the state should care about that. I am cynical to the point where I do not believe the state ever does care about that. And so like I even pivot back to, at least like on an economic level, again, like having a dysfunctional legal cannabis industry is bad for the state. It is bad for public health. It is bad for public safety. It does not contribute. It only takes away. And so if you're going to legalize it, you have to do it right and functional so that it actually benefits society as it should. And like, it's just very strange to me that seems not to be the impetus, but then also it feeds back into itself, right? Like Prop 64 gives money to law enforcement for enforcement. That just gives them more money overall. And it's kind of like,
but they were supposed to save money.
Maybe they still need a boogeyman.
Yeah.
They might still need a boogeyman, right?
They might, but that was one of the
Sounding a
things.
little conspiratorial, but I don't know. Like, I talk to a lot of lawmakers and a lot of policymakers and activists, as do you, and like, you kind of start to see how this pipeline all works, I guess.
Yeah, well, you start to look at something like that, and I remember, seeing how the breakdown on who's going to get the taxes, and I was like, wait a minute, why is law enforcement
Yeah.
getting that amount when we actually are lightening their load because they don't have to go after people for no reason anymore? Doesn't
Yeah,
that save them
because
money?
of course they have to get a cut. Everyone's got to make money from this, and that's why the syntax thing, it just doesn't work. It is incentivized wrong from the beginning, and it will only come back to bite advocates in the ass.
Yeah,
But sometimes it's also the only way to get it done, right? And I do also understand the point of view of we got to get this done, and then we can change it from within. It's just that, props are hard to change,
they are.
unfortunately.
They are. Well, that's the reason that I voted for 64 because I just realized that every time that this legalization issue came to the table, there were more greedy fingers that felt safe to get involved, and it was getting more and more convoluted. And then the next, if it didn't pass this time, the next time it came up, I just felt like it was going to be even uglier because we weren't listening to people who had the best interests of the industry at heart when they were making their proposals for legalization.
Yep, I completely agree, and that's why I did it too. I figured I did at the time really side with the it's got to happen, even if it's not perfect. And ultimately, what I do always come back to is it needs to end criminalization, and obviously it hasn't done that entirely, and of course it's still federally illegal. But ending criminalization and providing a path for expungement is always the number one priority. So I said, you know what, at the very least, let's start getting people out of jail.
Yeah.
That's obviously been done with varying success, but things have happened. So I guess like at the end of the day, that's what I sort of like justify it with. But yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. And that's, one of the things that when I look at policy throughout the United States, and I've visited several states that were either in their midst of their programs or, they were in the stage of, trying to pass programs. The people, policy isn't based on fact. It's based on,
Never.
no, it's, I always say state culture and stigma, but it's also influence. And I
It's
don't,
always influence, and that's just what goes in there. Like people have things to do. Okay, tell me what you wanted to say. I'll write it.
yeah, yeah. And the lack of critical thought really gets me. But what I don't get, and maybe you can tell me if you've noticed that it's different anywhere else, people seem to make the same mistakes over and over again.
Oh, yes, absolutely, because they only listen to the same however many people. And who has influence in this industry is definitely not synonymous with knowledge. It's, there's so many people who have very influential organizations and positions who have only been around since legalization and are, suddenly experts. And they can claim they've been around since the quote unquote beginning, but, everyone has their different definition of when this began, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, and then to your earlier point, like, I recently reported a story for San Francisco Chronicle about, medical bill that would increase access by requiring municipalities to allow at least one medical dispensary or delivery within its jurisdiction, even if they had outlawed cannabis, through Prop 64, through local control previously. And it's a good bill. It was a mostly good bill, but it allowed me, there was like one little thing overlooked, and I have some background on this that I wasn't able to get on record, so I shouldn't really, I can't really share it, but
Oh, I hear that.
the bill was vague in a way that maybe could possibly allow for a savvy actor to take advantage of the delivery portion of the bill and outlaw delivery throughout the state. It's convoluted. We don't need to waste airspace on it here. It's San Francisco Chronicle. You can read it. But to that point, it's like things make it into bills that the lawmaker doesn't know anything about cannabis. Not really. You know what
No.
I mean? And so they don't even know what they don't know to look out for when advocates and activists and lobbyists and what have you, give them suggestions and say, oh, this is a good idea. Like I do think many of them are acting in good faith. They just don't know what's necessarily a good idea and a bad idea, because this is not anyone's expertise. So that's kind of what happened in that place. Like Senator Wiener, I think, gave like a really good faith effort at a good bill, and it's a good bill. And then, I published that, and many activists were haranguing him, and they eventually changed the language to specify it. And again, I do believe that whole effort was in good faith, but it does highlight the things that get overlooked in policy just because, those who have that position of influence may not, have everybody's best interest at mind, let's say.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that there's distrust as well for people giving, help and information, and people wondering what's in it for them. Because I know for myself, when we passed 64, that was when I was one of the co-chairs of the legalization task force for San Francisco, and being a cannabis educator. And I love when people put that in quotes, and I'm like, yeah, I know there are some people out there that are armchair philosophers, but some of us have worked with thousands of people and are immersed in it.
It's like when they denigrated Obama for being a community organizer. It's like, no, that's actually like a really big deal.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I look at it like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, wanting to like, I normally charge for my services, and I was like, hey, knowing that the city and state has money, but still just being like, I believe in this enough that I will give you this information for free. If we're going to put those damn sheets in the bags, let's have them be correct. And nobody listened.
I believe that. I completely believe it.
Well, I'm sure you saw those informational sheets. They were horrible. And it's like, did you not talk to anybody? And you can't, when we're looking at this, I mean, we're at a, I'm going to go back to my org psych background, storming, norming, and reforming. That's what we're looking at right now.
It's true. It's true.
What are we going to do to like get people to talk to those who actually know what they're talking about, instead of, somebody who doesn't know anything but is safe under the umbrella of their institutionalization because they've got advanced degrees in something else. All of a sudden they're cleared to talk about this, but the person who isn't institutionalized in that manner but actually has practical knowledge that you can actually look up, and they're saying, oh no, I'm going to go for this person here instead. And
no, that's such a good point. It's very technocratic. There's like this technocratic vibe in the cannabis industry right now. It's like, oh, you have experience anywhere? Perfect. And it's like, yo, that guy's been growing for like 20 years. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it doesn't help legitimize it. I think cannabis is a real exercise in figuring out, like, it's kind of the whole, we can do business in a way that is compassionate. We can give back to our communities, and we need to be able to identify the people who are knowledgeable. And I'm not going to say experts because we're all learning.
Indeed.
But it's like touching upon, like, cannabis is a call out to critical thought, and it's really magnifying the fact that most people don't have it.
Yep, I completely agree with that. I have pretty much nothing. I'm just nodding if everyone can hear that.
I can hear your nod.
Yep. Well said, pretty much.
And when we're looking at that too, I mean, it's really put a huge stress on the industry, and it's really affecting, like, geez, my meetings and everything with talking to people. It's like there's a change in people's demeanor. And people are more defensive, and people are, scrambling. And it's a really weird time for people to be working in cannabis.
It really is. And I mean, I feel that particularly as a journalist. I mentioned before, like, sometimes people don't always get that you're just the messenger frequently. Yeah. I'm just telling you guys about what's happening. I'm not necessarily endorsing it or condemning it, just stating it. And people just kind of freak out over what you choose to cover and where and how, and they think that you're sort of, implicitly endorsing it. And sure, there is obviously some implicit bias in what a journalist chooses to cover and not. But sometimes newsworthy things are newsworthy and or they're interesting, or it's a data point, or you want to establish a line of reportage because you think something is going to be significant. And I just, cannabis is a subculture, and it is it has been criminalized. And I understand that there's not really the media literacy that there may be in other communities. And so that's been really interesting, talking to people, telling them how the reporting process works, et cetera, et cetera. But now and that was a little bit more collaborative when things were going better, and people were more open and willing to open up. And things have changed. I mean, everyone's anxieties are very high. Nobody wants anything negative. Nobody also wants to trash anything else because they all understand how everybody's suffering. Some people are extremely defensive. I've noticed kind of just misogynistic behavior has really taken an uptick. People just have shorter fuses and they're just less tolerant of any discord, whatever. So, publishing anything critical or frankly true can be a bit of an uphill battle. Everyone expects, I think there's also this hangover from maybe older cannabis media days when it was a lot more advocacy journalism and work, and there's, I think people kind of expect if you're writing about cannabis you're automatically an advocate, and I certainly am, and I'm very public with that view, and everyone knows that about me. But at the same time I have to be objective in my reporting, and
You do.
it's just people get real pissed at you if they think you're not supporting the movement or, at a critical time. And I feel that. And I always try to do right by the community and make sure it feels reflected in my work. But at the same time, also people have nowhere to take their frustration out, right? This is all kind of abstract and nebulous. You can hate the government, shakes fists at the air, but what can you really do about it, right? So it's pretty easy to take it out on a writer who's online and has several ways of contacting them. I have just gotten the craziest shit thrown my way. And so I feel that anxiety. I could never compare it to anybody actually working in the industry and literally financially suffering and everything else that they've gone through. So I won't even remotely put it on that level, to be clear. But I've noticed there's a vibe shift. I said to you, when we weren't recording before, I have friends at Hall of Flowers right now in Palm Springs right now. And this is their third show in 9 months, I think. And, the industry's not doing well. Those booths are expensive. And apparently it's not totally well attended. It's mostly corporate. There's not nearly as many industry people there. And apparently the vibe is really somber. So I've been talking about it in private with a lot of people, and this is a very long-winded way of saying, the anxiety is palpable, and the vibes are weird and bad, understandably so, and it's a lot. It's a heavy energy, let's say.
Yeah, it is. And I've noticed, I've had a lot of conversations with people in the past, especially the past year, but even before that, about just a lot of the stress and, people wanting to, figure out, they love cannabis, but they're I probably need to get out because I can't, it's hard to make a living, and just the general feel, how people are just really frustrated and sad and upset, and there are short fuses. People I don't want to be around that either. And for me, it's I got into this because I have a great love for what we do, and I'm lucky because I don't own a plant-touching business. I just work for one,
which is a big difference.
It's a huge difference. But then as a writer, whereas before I used to feel more comfortable putting a critical lens on things that we needed to do to support the industry and make it better. And a lot of this is changes that we need to make within as an industry, not necessarily through policy. I know it has to be said, but then I feel bad because I actually just I just did an article that they put on rollingstone.com about the fact that we shouldn't be naming products after qualities, because one person's calm is another person's hell.
Yes.
And it's true, we have to talk about it, because in the end, how the person ingesting it responds to it will shape the way our policy looks. Because if somebody has a bad experience, you've just changed somebody from somebody who's kind of curious to somebody who's saying it's bad.
And 1,000,000%.
But then you think about, well, geez, there are people I really like and are have great products, but they are doing this, and I don't want them to think that it's a knock on them, because it's not. It's about a greater conversation around mindfulness of how we are presenting it to the public, because, you know, the public, well, I mean, look at what we're seeing with like cancel culture. It's like, you know, yes, there
Yeah.
are some people who really do need to not be, you know, saying things.
Oh, but I think we can agree things have, it's there's it's gotten very a little unwieldy.
Yeah, it has. It has. And I feel like we have to take a step back, and it's, you know, even though a lot of our problems are coming from policy, we still have to stop and look at ourselves. And like you were saying, like some of the toxic, you know, masculinity that we're seeing in the industry, and that's, you know, and when I say that, I'm not saying putting it towards all men, but it's, you
No, of
know,
course not.
there are certain people. And when I first started working in this industry, there was this amazing opportunity for women to, you know, grow their businesses. We were seeing, like, people are saying, oh, they're breaking the glass ceiling in cannabis. And now we're returning to some of the old, same old that we see in other industries. And even to the point of, like, it was happening even before, because a fellow writer quoted me and another person in an article a couple years ago, and they were like, oh, you know, the dude was, you know, cannabis attorney extraordinaire and member of the San Francisco, you know, task force, and me, it was public education officer at Apothecarium. And I like got a hold of him, I'm like, dude, I'm the co-chair of that task force.
Yeah, like hello.
Or
Hi.
or like when I taught the first classes at City College San Francisco, another writer who wrote for the same magazine I did wrote an article about me with public education officer in quotes, like it wasn't real, but didn't even
Oh
talk to
yeah.
me, talk to the school and talk to the the professor that was teaching with me, who I asked to teach with me because he had a harm reduction background, no background in cannabis. But it was like, if I were a dude, I don't
It
think that
never
would have
happened.
happened.
No, I reported on a company that had recently had a change in CEO, and I got on the phone with this former CEO, and the first question I asked was, I heard you're not CEO anymore. Is that true? And he flipped out and said, what is this? I feel, you know, I'm getting ambushed. I feel like you're just nothing. You're just addressing rumors. You just want to talk about rumors. You're nothing but a gossip rag columnist.
Jeez.
Oh, just for asking if he was still CEO, which, by the way, he wasn't. It's an extremely straightforward question. Yeah, and there's just, he might have flipped out at anyone, but there's just no way he would have flipped out quite in that way to a male reporter. I know this because my partner is an investigative reporter, and he never gets spoken to this way. And, you know, he reports on criminal cops and bad politicians. So, like, please, you know what I mean? And, like, I have a good, you know, benchmark for this. And, like, there's just no way he ever would have called me a gossip columnist, you know, conflating something that's traditionally more feminine or associated with being feminine and toxic. It was so vile. And it just, yeah. And that vibe is seeping in because people are getting angrier. When people get angry, their basest, you know, motivations come out, right? And so things that they've been able to suppress consciously. And I feel like this latent misogyny is just totally part of that.
It is.
To be nice and light about it.
Yeah, it really makes me be grateful for all the solid women in the industry that help each other
Oh
out.
yeah, it's amazing. It's been the greatest like part of all of it, actually, just in my years reporting and getting to know everyone. That's been such a joy in my life.
Yeah.
A lot of support.
What are some of the things that you are excited and feel hopeful about with this?
Whew, I have to admit, I'm in a tough spot with all of this. Like, I've gone through some difficult reporting experiences recently, including, you know, a little bit of harassment and this and that. And, you know, I talk to a lot of people at all segments of the industry, and I'm hearing their stories, and they're all pretty bad stories right now. So I have to admit, like, I'm in a, you know, and I've stepped back a little from cannabis reporting. It's still part of my repertoire, but I did take a full-time job at San Diego Magazine, so I'll be doing more generalist San Diego reporting for a little while too, in addition to cannabis. And so I kind of needed a little bit of distance from it myself, and so I'm in a weird spot with it, but what I am excited for is the fact that I think it really is sinking in that the fight isn't over and that this is very much still not truly legal and not truly accessible. And I think people realize they're going to have to dig their heels in and become, political operatives. And I think that's kind of the next phase of this, moving from like activism to operative, right?
Yeah.
And so I do see that spirit catching, and I hope that that's something that can happen. I also, the normalization of it and the stigma decreases and only continues, and that's a good thing. And to, your point about misleading marketing and how that affects policy, reduction of stigma also, affects policy, right? And so that's only a good thing society-wide over time. So those are definitely two things that, it's hard not to be encouraged by, to say the least.
Yeah, I feel like we're at the stage where we really, I used to feel more like, oh, whether you talk about your use or not, it's your own business. And I still do, like with everything. Like people need to have their own boundaries. But
Totally.
we are at a point in time where, like, if I was still behind the bar and somebody was, and I used to say this when people would be like, oh, your dispensary is greedy or these companies are greedy. And that's when I would look at them and I go, listen, this has to do with policy. This has to do with policy that's allowed this taxation. And the reason that this taxation is allowed is because your elected official doesn't see the face of who's using cannabis. So it's time to step up. It's time to
Totally.
say, I'm a highly functioning member of society that contributes. I have a job. I pay taxes, or
Oh,
if
I
you don't
could
have a
not
job,
agree
whatever,
more.
but you pay
That's cool
taxes.
too.
Yeah, you're a good person. You contribute to society. You use cannabis, and you vote.
Yeah, I'm with that too. I mean, very recently I was on the cover of the San Diego Reader, which is an alt weekly here in town, smoking a joint while writing, and it was about something. It was an article about kind of like part of my freelance career. It was a local thing, but it was like a big deal. Like that magazine is run by a pro-life, a very devout Catholic guy, and he put a pot smoker smoking on the cover. It's San Diego's kind of a conservative town. It
Yeah.
just never would have happened before. And, right after that, I got, this job at our flagship lifestyle magazine in town. And I've been very, very, very public with my use. And they want me to bring a cannabis vertical to the magazine. And I reiterate, San Diego's a conservative town. And like, yeah, like there's just no way that a magazine like that would allow me to have a public job like that after being so out, even just 5 years ago.
Right.
I just know it because I've been writing for the magazine that long. And so, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but because I don't think it has less to do with me and more just the tide of things. Like things are changing, and that's encouraging. And so I had felt that me being out, I've kind of like seen a ripple effect, and it's very empowering for me. Of course, I'm a blonde white lady, and I went to a good college, and I have my name in newspapers and stuff. Like it's very easy for me to say, right? But I also feel that because I can, I should. So,
Well, yeah, and the fact that the way who you are and what you look like is very accessible to the greater public, where people are like, oh, she's friendly, she's a blonde-haired white lady and she's smoking a joint. That's like,
yeah.
it opens people's minds to be like, oh, maybe it's not so bad. Because when we do see the stereotypical, like when they think of, oh, they're a user, it's like,
Yeah, I have
it's
to admit, I think about that.
yeah.
I really do. I think about the optics of that and my specific optics. Yeah, it sounds like totally navel gazy, but I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, that's, for me, like when I go to my meetings and everything, it's, my husband laughs. He's like, oh, look at you. You're all suited up in your heels and everything. I'm like, well, I got to show up bulletproof. But what makes me
Yeah.
laugh is when I put something up on Twitter or something like that. Like the other year I put up, we'd just gotten in Seth Rogen's flower houseplant. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to, put something up on social media. So I'd just been gifted this pretty little like handheld water pipe. So I put like a little bit of weed in there, and I was eating an orange that day. I'm like, oh, that looks pretty with it. Let's just put the jar there and I'll take a picture. I put it on Twitter, and one of the responses was, I bet she doesn't even use weed. And I started to laugh. I was like,
love that one. Love that one. I'm like,
I'm
oh, really? Do you
incognito.
want to try? Nothing will turn me into a bro faster than that. It'll be like, okay, cool, let's dab then. Like, I definitely have a bro streak. Like, that would,
Me
like,
too.
I am so competitive, and I would just be like, oh, really? And I have been. And it's definitely resulted in me getting way too stoned, but that's neither here nor there.
I kind of felt the same way. It's like I turned to Jeff and I was like, well, I said, I feel like I have to bring my torch out now. Maybe I need to
Yep.
do that with my
There's only one
suit
thing
on.
to do. Been there. Yep.
Right. And then I'm thinking, well, geez, that really says a lot too, because people who are using cannabis have a certain idea of who, uses it. And I want to be like, spend an
Such a good point.
afternoon in my waiting room and you'll see like everybody.
Yeah. That's a really good point. The stigma and the stereotypes that exist within you, like people who use and within the community. I really never thought about that. That's such a good point.
We have a lot of work to do on all sides with our perception of who uses cannabis, who works in cannabis, who can actually create, positive change, because I feel like there's just a lot of silos of what people think, who people think do things, and who can be effective and who isn't effective. And this is where, and I think it's just human nature that we categorize people, because it's a survival mechanism that no longer serves us.
Could not agree more.
Yeah, Jackie, I'm so glad we got a chance to talk. And for our listeners who are out there, what's the best way for them to follow you, and how can they subscribe to your newsletter and just check out everything that you do?
So I am, for better or worse, pretty decently Googleable. So my name is Jackie Bryant. On Instagram, JACQBRY. I'm on Twitter, Cannabis, CANNABITCH.substack.com. You can find me through San Diego Magazine. I'm definitely on the World Wide Web, and I would love to see you there. We have a lot of fun.
I love your newsletter. I just think that you have such
thank
great
you.
insight. Yeah. Oh, it's awesome. And I'm so glad that we finally got a chance to talk. And I'm looking
Me
forward
too.
to
I've
future
wanted to get to
conversations.
know you for a while.
Me
Yeah,
too.
I've been wanting to get this is truly a delight. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And for those of you listening out there, remember, Planted is twice a month. And if you want to follow us on social media, on Facebook, we are Planted with Sara Pion. On IG and Twitter, we are Planted with Sara. And, if you want to check out what I'm doing and see things like pictures of my cat, cannabis education, and, things that I'm cooking, I'm Sara Mitra Pion on IG. Everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I know I did. Tune in next time. And if you do enjoy the episodes, please leave us comments. Share it with a friend. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We are on TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, Apple, and Google. And of course, our home network based out of Chicago, Illinois, Radio Misfits Network, where you can listen to a lot of amazing podcasts. One of my favorite wine podcasts is on there, The Winemakers, so check it out. Until next time, it's a crazy world out there. Be good to each other, stay safe, and until next time, stay curious. Take care, everyone.